Just 2. The angel of the Lord went up from Gilgal to Bokim. He said, I brought you up from Egypt, and I led you into the land I had solemnly promised to give you to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, but you must not make an agreement with the people who live in this land. You should tear down the altars where they worship, but you have disobeyed me. Why would you do such a thing? At that time, I also warned you, if you disobey, I will not drive out the Canaanites before you. They will ensnare you, and their gods will lure you away. When the angel of the Lord finished speaking the words to all the Israelites, the people wept loudly. They named the place Bokim and offered sacrifices to the Lord there. When Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites went to their allotted portions of territory, intending to take possession of the land. The people worshiped the Lord throughout Joshua's lifetime, and as long as elderly men who lived remained alive, these men had witnessed all the great things the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the Lord's servant, died at the age of 110. The people buried him in the allotted land of Timnah-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. That entire generation passed away. A new generation rose up. They had not personally experienced the Lord's presence or seen what he had done for Israel. The Israelites did evil before the Lord by worshiping the Baals. They abandoned the Lord God of their ancestors, who brought them out of Egypt. They followed other gods, the gods of the nations who lived around them. They worshiped them and made the Lord angry. They abandoned the Lord and worshiped Baal and the Ashtoreths. The Lord was furious with Israel and handed them over to robbers who plundered them. He turned them over to their enemies who lived around them. They could no longer withstand their enemies' attacks. Whenever they went out to fight, the Lord did them harm, just as he had warned and solemnly vowed he would do. They suffered greatly. The Lord raised up leaders who delivered them from these robbers, but they did not obey their leaders. Instead, they prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They quickly turned aside from the path their ancestors had walked. Their ancestors had obeyed the Lord's commands, but they did not. When the Lord raised up leaders for them, the Lord was with each leader and delivered the people from their enemies while the leaders remained alive. The Lord felt sorry for them when they cried out in agony because of what their harsh oppressors did to them. When a leader died, the next generation would again act more wickedly than the previous one. They would follow after other gods, worshiping them and bowing down to them. They did not give up their practices or their stubborn ways. The Lord was furious with Israel. He said, "This nation has violated the terms of the covenant I made with their ancestors by disobeying me. So I will no longer remove before them any of the nations that Joshua left unconquered when he died. In order to test Israel, I want to see whether or not the people will carefully walk in the path marked out by the Lord as their ancestors were careful to do. This is why the Lord permitted these nations to remain and did not conquer them immediately. He did not hand them over to Joshua." Hey, Smoking Schizo, welcome in, friend. Bum, bum, bum. Anything else there? Just some cookies. Okay. So what we have here, again, at the beginning of Judges is some things that already happened in the book of Joshua. Now, what's interesting here is we have a summary of the angel of the Lord went up to Gilgal to Bokim. So Wondering what Bokim means. We'll look that up in a second, although there's a footnote, so it might tell us. There's a recounting of the angel saying, now remember, there's a pillar of cloud and there's a pillar of smoke, and we have Moses and the burning bush. So it does tell us at the burning bush that there's an angel, and it says the Lord called to him from the bush. So we have all three represented there. We have the pillar of cloud and the pillar of smoke, and now we're having that is in essence the personification of the presence of the angel of the Lord who was with them. We also have the angel of the Lord who went throughout the land with the last plague. So there's a presence with them. Here it's personifying itself as the one who led them out. Don't see any issue with that. It's just a summary of how they got to where they are. And I said these things to you, and you promised to do them, and do not tear down and worship them, but you have disobeyed me. So all the things that you were instructed to do when you got to the land, you are now disobeying. And I told you, if you disobeyed, I'll not drive them out. So this right here at the beginning is explaining why there are still some people in the land, because the Israelites, prior to finishing the conquering of things, they turn away from God. And then God is, they're going to be a snare to you. I'm going to let them stay so they will lure you away. Like, wouldn't God want to not lure you away? But no, he doesn't. He wants us to stand firm in and of ourselves. He wants us in genuine relationship with him. So when the angel finished speaking, they all weep loudly, and they offer sacrifices. And this is the place called Bokim. Bokim means weeping ones, and is derived from the Hebrew verb boka, which means to weep. So boka is to weep, and Bokim are the weeping ones. So the city is called the weeping ones. Like, they have cities that have names and meanings to them. Why do they not notice these when there's all these names pointing to events and other things that they should remember and pay attention to? I mean, there's a part that just, I understand how people are, but there's the like this, come on, people. Okay, then Joshua dismissed them. Okay, wait. So we're getting a backup here, okay? We're getting a backup. We have the introduction to the book of Judges. Joshua has died. That's what we're getting told. But now we're backing up. We are hearing at the end. So we had the summary that Joshua has died. We're going to have a book about what happens after Joshua has died. But we back up to a summary of the land and what was left. And then what happens right before Joshua dies. And then Joshua's death. And then, like I said, this is also what we hear in the end of Joshua. During the lifetime, the people of Joshua and the men who were with him, people remained faithful. After they died, they don't. We get Joshua is 110 when he dies, a ripe old age. So remember, he is one of the few who is going to be with Caleb and Joshua, or the two, actually, I should just say that, who do get to wander in the desert for 40 years and not die, and then still get to go in the land. So Moses and Aaron don't die in the desert. They die before they cross into the land. So they get to be on the east side of the Jordan, see it, but Moses and Aaron both die. Caleb and Joshua both go in. And Caleb and Joshua are the two spies that spied out the land when the other 10 said, we can't do it. We have a recounting of where he is buried. And when that generation passes away, the next generation grew up, and they had not personally experienced or seen what God had done. This is another reason why it's really important when it talks about teaching these things to your children, and when your children ask you why you do these things, to explain why you do these things. Clearly, they stop doing that along the way. They don't explain and they don't participate. They do not practice the things. They're not passing on. God is the one who brought us out of slavery in Egypt. Like, you would think that's enough to motivate you to, wow, God did that. However, you could see this all over the place, that one generation does one thing, a second generation something else, and by the time you get to a third generation, they may be far away from what the first generation held to or believed. So they abandon God. They go after the balls. They're going after all of those things. God is angry. He abandons them. The Lord is furious. He hands them over to robbers and plunderers. I wonder what they... I thought it had a footnote on the robbers earlier, but... Maybe I missed it. Okay, he hands them over to robbers. It's not usually the way I have heard it read. I wondered what word was there. Turned them over to the enemies who they could not stand against, and they would be outfought, and solemnly vow they suffered greatly. So he had warned them, and then he carries out what he warns them. So when people get all upset and think that God is a God of vengeance, he's just there waiting to smite you, and look at the genocide in what happens in the land, Judges is telling us it wasn't genocide. There were people left. They did not fully conquer them. And then they were influenced by the people that were there, that remained, and they turned away from God to follow their enemies' gods, which is bizarre. Like just take a sports rivalry, okay? And Mrs. Panic, hey, welcome in. Thank you for taking notes. I'm just going to take the Aggies and the Texas Longhorns, okay? I'm not going to, if I'm an Aggie, wear burnt orange. I'm not going to associate with anybody that has cattle. I'm going to stay away from Longhorns. I'm not even going to do anything to, I probably, there are some schools where you don't even mention the name or the state. Like there's that school down south that doesn't mention that school up north. I mean, there's all those kinds of things. So if this is actual enemies, those are just sports rivalries, these are actual enemies, why would you ever, it just, I don't know. My brain has a hard time wrapping around that. And again, we have the motif. This is a common motif. They prostituted themselves with other gods and worship them. God is in relationship with the people. To go after other gods is to break the fidelity of the marriage covenant because they had a marriage covenant with God at Mount Sinai. So every time that they are going after other gods, it is a breaking of the marriage covenant. Okay, I know it's a weird kind of thing to think of, but that is the premise for all of the references throughout the Old Testament of the prostitution, of the prostituting themselves. It is worship of other gods. Now, could it have some sexual things that happen in the worship of those other gods? Yes, but it's not about the sexual things. It's about the worship of the other gods. Then it says, so we're getting also a summary of what is going to happen. When the Lord raised up leaders for them, the Lord was with each leader and delivered the people from their enemies while the leader remained alive. The Lord felt sorry for them when they cried out in agony, when it was harsh oppression. So we're getting a summary of what the book is going to be. There are going to be times when God is going to raise up a leader because he is sympathetic to them, and they will deliver for a time. But then when the leader dies, the next generation would act more wickedly than the previous one. So this is what the book is going to be. We're going to hear stories of awful situations, great leaders, and return to awful situations. The Lord is furious with Israel. The nation has violated the terms of the covenant I made with their ancestors in disobeying me. So I will no longer remove before them any of the nations that Joshua left, unconquered when he died, in order to test Israel. So this is, again, there were nations that Joshua did not conquer. Why did he not conquer them? Because we didn't want the land to go wild. There were farms there. And so when you wanted to take them over, you didn't want them to just be corrupted and disintegrate. The houses as well, you wanted them to be lived in. So until they were big enough and had enough need for the space, there were other people that were there. And now they're going to remain as a test to the people because they already began to worship other gods. I'm going to leave them there and see if they'll keep doing that. And they're supposed to walk carefully the path marked out by God for their ancestors to carefully do. And they don't. They don't. So we're getting explanations of why the land was not conquered. We're getting explanations of what is going to be in this book. And we're getting explanations of what God is doing throughout that whole thing. All right. I know that was a lot, but I think we need a lot of explanation here at the beginning of Judges to make sure that we know everything that's going on. Okay,